She arrives before sunrise, crossing entire neighborhoods just to be present where she is most invisible. But everything changes when a small gesture of affection awakens jealousy in someone who always wanted to be noticed but was never chosen. A cruel accusation threatens to take from her not only her job, but also the love of a child who learned the true meaning of the word mother. And when the truth finally explodes, no one in that house will escape the impact. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. Continuing. The morning in London was still dark when Marion stepped off the second bus, adjusting her worn cloth bag on her shoulder and pulling her thin coat tighter against the chilly June wind. Her rough hands, marked by years of labor, held the strap firmly as she walked through the deserted streets of Kensington Gardens, where mansions slept, protected by high walls and security cameras. She knew every corner of that route, every tree, every gate. For 5 years she had taken the same path, leaving Dagenham before 5 in the morning to arrive promptly at 6:30 at the Ashton Cole residence. The house was imposing, all in shades of grey and white with mirrored windows that reflected the sky still tinged with purple. The garden was impeccable, every shrub perfectly pruned, every path stone aligned with millimeter precision. Marion typed the code at the side gate, the same one all employees used, and followed the narrow corridor that led to the service entrance. Inside, the mansion was even more impressive. Marble floors that reflected the recessed lights, a grand wooden staircase that curved gently upwards, chandeliers that looked like suspended jewels from the high ceiling. She put her bag in the laundry room locker, donned her navy blue apron, and tied her grey hair into a low bun. There was no time to lose. She climbed the service stairs to the second floor, treading lightly so as not to make a sound. The children's bedroom door was ajar, as always. Marion pushed it open slowly and felt her heart clench with tenderness at the sight of little Isabella still sleeping, clutching her faded teddy bear, her brown curls spread across the pillow. The girl was 3.5, but Marion had followed every day of her life since she was just a 10-month-old baby. She remembered perfectly the first time she entered that house, hired only for cleaning, and found the child crying in her crib while everyone seemed too busy to attend to her. Since then, without anyone officially asking, Marion began to do much more than sweep and mop. She gently woke Isabella, prepared the breakfast the girl truly liked, arranged her school uniform, and braided her hair in styles that made the little one proud. She sat on the edge of the bed and stroked the girl's soft hair. Isabella slowly opened her eyes, still sleepy, and when she recognized Marion, her little face lit up with a smile that melted any heart. "Aunt Marion," the child murmured, extending her little arms. Marion hugged her, smelling the scent of baby shampoo and feeling the warmth of the small body against her chest. "Good morning, my love. Time to wake up for another beautiful day," she whispered, kissing the top of the girl's head. While helping Isabella change from her pajamas into her day clothes, Marion heard the sounds of the house waking up. Firm footsteps in the main corridor, the deep voice of Robert Ashton Cole on the phone early in the morning, probably with someone on the other side of the world where it was still night. He was an imposing man, a little over 40, with well-cut black hair just starting to grey at the temples, impeccable suits, and the upright posture of someone who never doubted his place in the world. Owner of a rapidly growing technology company, Robert had transformed a startup into an empire valued at hundreds of millions. Meetings in New York, contracts in Europe, expansion into Asia. His name appeared in business magazines, on lists of successful young entrepreneurs, on international conference panels. But there, on that quiet morning, as Marion carefully combed Isabella's curls not to pull, Robert hurried down the corridor without even glancing at his daughter's room. His voice echoed authoritatively, giving orders, demanding reports, scheduling appointments. For him, the morning was already running late. He had a meeting at 8, a video conference at 9:30, and a business lunch at noon. His daughter was fine. The house was running perfectly. There was an entire staff taking care of everything. There was no reason to worry. Marion finished the braids and put in the little pink bows Isabella adored. The girl ran to the mirror and clapped her hands, satisfied. Then she took Marion's hand, and they went down to the kitchen together, where Marion prepared heart-shaped pancakes, just the way the little one liked them, with honey and sliced strawberries. Isabella ate slowly, talking about the cartoon she watched the day before, about her school friend who had a dog, about the dream she had of an ice cream castle. Meanwhile, the house followed its mechanical routine. Robert swept through the kitchen like a whirlwind, grabbing an espresso that the cook had prepared, checking his expensive wristwatch, not even noticing his daughter was there. Isabella raised her little hand, trying to get his attention. "Daddy, look at my new bow." He mumbled something distracted, already with the phone glued to his ear again, and exited through the garage door. The roar of the imported car's engine lasted for an instant, before fading away. Isabella's little face lost some of its sparkle. Marion felt the pain of that rejection as if it were her own. She knelt beside the girl's chair and gently held her chin. "He's very busy today, my love. But look, how beautiful you are." The girl nodded, but her eyes were already seeking another kind of comfort, the kind Marion always knew how to offer without hesitation. At exactly 8 o'clock, the person everyone in the house called Ms. Claire came downstairs. Claire Meadows was about 50, with dark blonde dyed hair always tied in an impeccable ponytail, manicured nails, and sober but good quality clothes. She was the house manager, responsible for coordinating all staff, managing purchases, overseeing renovations, ensuring everything ran like a 5-star hotel. She took her job very seriously, perhaps too seriously. "Good morning," Claire greeted, with a nod, her eyes scanning the kitchen for any imperfection. "Marion, after you get the girl ready, I need you to pay special attention to the living room. Mr. Ashton Cole will be receiving Japanese investors tomorrow afternoon." Marion nodded, knowing this would mean extra hours of work, but she didn't complain. She never complained. Claire took an apple from the fruit bowl and began to peel it with surgical precision, but her eyes never stopped observing Isabella and Marion. There was something in the way the girl clung to Marion, in the natural intimacy between them, that deeply bothered Claire. She herself spent hours organizing the house, ensuring everything was perfect, but Isabella never ran into her arms. She never asked Claire to braid her hair or tell stories. The girl treated her politely, but without affection, as if she recognized the hierarchy but felt no emotional connection. At 8:30, Jessica, Isabella's official nanny, finally appeared. She was a woman in her 30s, always well-dressed, with decorated nails and straightened hair falling over her shoulders. She had been hired 2 years ago by a specialized agency, with impeccable references and a resume that promised total dedication. In the beginning, she even delivered, but gradually she relaxed, trusting that there were other people in the house to cover her shortcomings. She always arrived just in time, spent most of the day on her phone answering personal messages, and let Isabella watch television for hours while she browsed social media. Marion never said anything. It wasn't her place to complain about another employee. But when she saw Jessica distracted while Isabella called for attention, when she realized the girl hadn't done her homework because no one sat with her, when she noticed Isabella was hungry because Jessica forgot her snack, Marion silently stepped in. She stayed beyond her hours, even knowing she would miss the bus and arrive home late. She gave up her own lunch to prepare something Isabella liked. She carried the girl in her arms when she cried from tiredness, sang lullabies when nightmares came in the middle of the night and no one else heard. That morning, Jessica took Isabella's hand in a hurry. "Come on, little one, you need to get to school on time today." The girl looked back at Marion, with that gaze that always broke Marion's heart. She wanted to stay a little longer. She wanted a farewell hug. She wanted to hear that everything would be all right until they met again in the late afternoon. Marion waved, blowing a kiss, and Isabella returned it before being pulled away. The silence that remained was always heavy. Marion returned to work, but her mind stayed with the girl. She wondered if she was warm enough, if she had taken her little jacket in her backpack, if she would remember to eat her fruit snack. These were mother's worries. Though she had no official right to worry like that, she was just the cleaning lady after all. She received the lowest salary in the house, had no say in decisions about the child, and was not consulted on anything. But she loved Isabella as if she were her own daughter. The day followed its relentless course. Marion cleaned the bedrooms, vacuumed the stairs, polished the metals in the main bathroom, organized the pantry, and changed the towels in Robert's suite. The mansion had so many rooms that even with the help of another employee who came 3 times a week, the work never ended. Claire passed by at least once an hour inspecting every corner, pointing out details that needed improvement. A slightly crooked painting, a cushion out of place, a vase that needed fresh flowers. Her voice always had that tone of veiled superiority, as if each instruction was a reminder of who was in charge. At noon, Marion took a quick break to eat the packed lunch she had brought from home. She sat in the service area, away from the main kitchen, and ate in silence, thinking about her own children she had left in Dagenham. She had 2 already grown, one working as a delivery rider and the other studying IT at night school. They managed on their own now, but there was a time when Marion came home exhausted and still had to help with homework, make dinner, and wash uniforms. She had raised the 2 practically alone after her husband abandoned them when the boys were still small. She knew what it was like to be a single mother, what it was like to choose between paying the rent and buying medicine, what it was like to lie about not being hungry so her children could eat more. Perhaps that was why she understood so well the emptiness in Isabella's eyes. The girl had everything in material terms, lived in a mansion worth millions, wore imported clothes, had toys that cost more than Marion's monthly salary, but she lacked presence. She didn't have a comforting lap at the right moment, a bedtime story, someone who would stop everything to listen to her talk about her day at school. Robert thought paying for the best school, the best nanny, the best of everything was enough. He didn't realize he was buying substitutes for his own absence. At 3 in the afternoon, Marion was in Robert's office, a room entirely, paneled in dark wood, with shelves full of business books and framed awards. She was carefully dusting the furniture when her eyes fell on something she hadn't seen there in a long time, a small, delicate, navy blue velvet box resting on the low cabinet next to the window. Marion recognized it immediately. It was the jewelry case Robert had given his wife years ago, shortly before the accident that took her life. Caroline Ashton Cole had died when Isabella was just 10 months old. It had been an absurd, avoidable car accident, a tragic combination of heavy rain, a bald tire, and a truck that veered into their lane. Marion wasn't working at the house yet when it happened, but she had heard the story told in fragments by the other staff. She knew Robert had almost gone mad with grief, that he had spent weeks locked in his office, that he had considered selling everything and disappearing. But in the end he chose the opposite. He plunged headfirst into work, as if every contract closed, every million earned could fill the hole Caroline had left. The jewel inside that little box was a pearl necklace with a white gold clasp and a delicate pendant, a family heirloom that had belonged to Robert's grandmother. He had given it to Caroline on their last birthday together, just weeks before everything fell apart. Since then, the necklace had been kept, untouched, a symbol of all that had been lost. Seeing the box there exposed was unusual. Robert usually kept it locked in the safe. Marion supposed he had taken it out in a moment of nostalgia and forgotten to put it away again. She cleaned around it with great care without even touching the box. It wasn't her place to meddle with personal objects, especially something so loaded with meaning. She finished her work in the office and moved on to the other rooms, unaware that that small navy blue velvet object was about to completely change her life. In the late afternoon, Isabella returned from school brought by Jessica, but went straight into Marion's arms, who was folding clothes in the laundry room. The girl clung to her waist, burying her face in the apron. "Aunt Marion, I made a drawing today. Want to see?" Marion dropped everything immediately, wiped her hands and knelt to Isabella's height. "Of course, my love. Show me." The girl pulled a sheet of paper from her backpack where she had drawn 2 figures holding hands, one large and one small, both smiling under a huge yellow sun. Below, in crooked, uneven letters, was written something Marion had to read twice to be sure of what she saw. "Me and my heart, Mum." The tears came unbidden. Marion hugged Isabella tightly, her chest clenching with emotion. "It's beautiful," she whispered, her voice choked. "You're very special to me too, you know?" The entire scene was observed from afar by Claire, who was coming up the stairs, carrying papers. She stopped, hidden by the corner of the wall, and watched that moment of affection with a mixture of feelings she couldn't quite name herself. Jealousy, certainly. Envy, perhaps. But also something deeper, more painful. The awareness that, despite all her efforts, all her dedication to the house, all her administrative competence, she was just an efficient employee. She would never be loved. She would never inspire that kind of devotion in Isabella. The girl treated her politely, obeyed her, but didn't seek her out for hugs. She didn't make drawings putting Claire as the central figure of her life. And that, Claire thought as she climbed the stairs with heavier steps, was profoundly unfair. She had education, she had experience, she dressed well, she spoke correctly. Marion was just a simple woman, without formal education, who came from the outskirts. How could she occupy such an important place in the girl's heart? How dare she be called a heart mom when she wasn't even hired to care for the child? That night, Robert arrived late again, after 10. Isabella had been asleep for hours, lulled by Marion, who had stayed beyond her shift, because Jessica needed to leave early for a personal appointment. Robert entered silently, went straight to his room, not even stopping by his daughter's room to say good night. He was exhausted, his head buzzing with numbers, strategies, problems he needed to solve. Tomorrow would be another busy day. It always was. He didn't know his daughter had cried before bed, asking when her father would arrive to say good night. He didn't know Marion had promised that maybe tomorrow he would have more time. He didn't know he was losing, day after day, the chance to get to know the incredible girl Isabella was becoming. He didn't know that the employee he barely greeted in the morning was, in practice, the present mother in his daughter's life. And he also didn't know that downstairs, sitting alone in her functional room attached to the house, Claire Meadows was beginning to plot something that would change everything. She looked out the window at the dark London night, the city lights twinkling in the distance, and felt a tightness in her chest that gradually transformed into cold anger. It wasn't fair. Marion didn't deserve that place. Someone needed to show Robert who truly had value in that house. Someone needed to expose the deception. In her dresser drawer, Claire kept newspaper clippings about employees who had stolen from employers, stories of domestic betrayals, cases of broken trust. She collected them without really knowing why, but now she was beginning to understand. Perhaps she had been preparing unconsciously for this moment. If she could prove that Marion was unworthy, if she could make Robert see the supposed mistake he had made in trusting that woman so much, perhaps then Isabella would realize that there were other people in the house, more qualified people, who deserved her affection. The plan was still hazy in Claire's mind, but one thing she knew for sure. The navy blue velvet box, that precious and meaningful object, would be the key. She just had to wait for the right moment, the perfect opportunity. And Claire was patient. She had spent her entire life waiting for recognition, for a place in the sun. She could wait a little longer. Meanwhile, in the small room Robert had given Marion so she could rest when she stayed late caring for Isabella, Marion finally allowed herself to lie down. She was bone-tired, but it was a tiredness. That came with purpose. She knew that the next day Isabella would wake up asking for her again, that there would be braids to do, stories to tell, a lap to offer, and Marion would be there, as always, invisible to almost everyone, but absolutely essential to a 3-year-old who had learned that love was not measured by the size of the house, but by the presence of those who stay. Isabella's drawing was there, carefully kept in Marion's bag. Me and my heart mom. 5 words written with difficulty by a small child, but carrying more truth than all. The millionaire contracts Robert signed. Marion closed her eyes, feeling immense gratitude and a small, almost imperceptible fear that this simple, silent happiness could, somehow, be taken from her. She didn't know how prophetic this fear would prove to be. She didn't imagine that in the coming days her life would be turned upside down, that she would be accused of the unthinkable, humiliated, expelled, almost destroyed. She didn't foresee that she would have to fight for the dignity she had always carried with such pride, nor that the truth about who really mattered in that house would need to be revealed in the most painful way possible. For now she slept peacefully, dreaming of Isabella laughing in the park, holding her hand, calling her Aunt Marion, with that tiny voice that warmed any winter. The week continued with its relentless routine, but something in the air of the mansion seemed different. Claire Meadows observed Marion's every move with renewed attention, mentally noting times, habits, moments when Marion was alone. She also studied Robert's behavior, noticing when he was more stressed, when his patience was shorter, when he was emotionally vulnerable. A successful businessman could be a powerful man, but he was still human, susceptible to the same weaknesses as everyone else. That Thursday, Robert had a particularly difficult video conference with investors from California. The international expansion project he championed so strongly was meeting resistance, questions about viability, demands for more data, more projections, more guarantees. He left the office with his jaw clenched, his shoulders tense, that contained anger of someone unaccustomed to hearing no. He went down to get water in the kitchen and was intercepted by Claire in the corridor. "Mr. Ashton Cole, may I have a minute?" Her voice was soft, almost maternal, calibrated to soothe. He nodded, somewhat distracted. "I just wanted to say I've noticed you've been under a lot of pressure lately. If you need anything, any adjustment in the house to make your day more peaceful, just say the word. This house works for you, not against you." Robert looked at her with a flash of gratitude. It was rare for anyone to acknowledge the burden he carried. "Thank you, Claire. Sometimes it feels like everyone wants a piece of me and forgets I'm just one person." Claire nodded with studied understanding. "I can only imagine how difficult it must be, especially without Caroline to share the burden. She was so present, so attentive to everything. She must be terribly missed." The mention of his deceased wife touched a raw nerve. Robert looked away, the old pain still pulsing beneath the surface. "She is," he admitted softly. "Every day." Claire placed her hand on his arm for an instant, a calculated, comforting gesture. "Isabella is a lucky girl to have such a dedicated father, even with everything you face. Caroline would be proud." The conversation lasted only a few minutes, but it left Robert slightly more receptive to Claire, more inclined to trust her judgment when the time came. She knew this. She was patient, meticulous. She would not act on impulse. She would wait for the perfect opportunity. That opportunity began to take shape on Friday morning. Robert finally decided to put the velvet box in the safe, something he'd been postponing for days. He called Claire to the office and asked her to bring the house insurance papers, as he wanted to confirm the jewel was properly registered. While he was looking through the documents, he received an urgent call from Tokyo. He had to answer immediately. It was about the contract that could save the quarter. He dropped everything, asked Claire to wait there in the office, and rushed upstairs to his room where the internet connection was more stable. Claire was left alone in the office, surrounded by Robert's trophies and diplomas, by the smell of leather books and waxed wood. Her eyes fell on the blue box, still open on the table. Inside, the pearls glowed softly under the morning light coming through the window. It was so beautiful, so valuable, so full of history. And suddenly, like a lightning bolt cutting through the dark sky, the idea crystallized in her mind with terrifying clarity. If that jewel disappeared and was found in Marion's possession, everything would change. Robert would be devastated, betrayed, furious. The trust he apparently placed in Marion would crumble, and Isabella, however much she cried at first, would eventually understand that you cannot trust just anyone, that there are hierarchies that must be respected. Claire closed her eyes for an instant, testing the weight of the decision. It was risky. It was cruel. But the alternative was to remain invisible, to remain merely the efficient administrator whom no one truly loved. She picked up the box with steady hands and placed it inside her own handbag, which was hanging on the chair nearby. Then she organized the papers as if nothing had happened, and when Robert came downstairs 20 minutes later, she was calmly reviewing the insurance. He thanked her for her patience, but was clearly perturbed by the conversation with the Japanese. He didn't even look at the table. Claire left the office carrying not just papers, but the instrument of a cold revenge. Throughout the day, she carried the hidden box, waiting for the ideal moment. Marion, oblivious to everything, followed her routine with her usual dedication. In the morning, she took Isabella to the small park within the gated community, pushing the swing while the girl laughed loudly, her curls flying in the wind. Afterwards, she prepared the child's favorite lunch, rice and beans with a very small steak cut into tiny pieces, just the way Isabella could eat by herself and feel proud of it. In the afternoon, while the girl napped, Marion took the opportunity to clean the upstairs bathrooms, a job that required attention to detail. It was precisely at this moment, around 3 in the afternoon, that Claire found her chance. Marion needed to go down to the basement to get cleaning supplies that were running out. It was a damp, somewhat dark environment, where the washing machines, the sink, shelves with provisions and cleaning materials were kept. Marion left her bag hanging on its usual hook, that worn cloth bag she had carried for years, mended in 2 places but still functional. Claire waited for Marion to disappear down the back corridor where the storage cupboards were. Then she descended the service stairs with her heart pounding, but her hands steady. She looked around, confirming they were alone. The house was large enough that the other employees would be in completely different sections. She approached Marion's bag and, without hesitation, opened the main zipper and thrust the velvet box deep inside, pushing it under the old wallet, the keys, the medicine case. She closed the bag, took 2 steps back, and took a deep breath. It was done. There was no turning back now. She quickly went upstairs, returning to her activities as if nothing had happened, but inside she felt a strange mixture of triumph and nausea. She tried to justify it to herself. It wasn't malice, it was justice. Marion was occupying a place that didn't belong to her. Isabella deserved more suitable role models. Robert needed to see that he had trusted the wrong person. It was all for everyone's good, Claire repeated to herself, trying to silence the little voice that insisted on calling her cruel. The rest of the day passed normally. Marion returned from the basement with the supplies, finished cleaning, and played a little more with Isabella when the girl woke up. Jessica spent the late afternoon scrolling on her phone while Isabella watched cartoons, and Marion prepared the little one's dinner even though it wasn't her job. Robert arrived around 8, ate dinner alone in his office while reviewing contracts, and went upstairs to sleep without interacting with his daughter, who was already in bed. Saturday dawned sunny, rare for London's winter. Robert, exceptionally, had no work commitments scheduled. He decided to use the morning to finally organize some personal matters he had been postponing. One of them was precisely to put that jewel in the safe once and for all. He went up to the office determined, but when he looked for the box in the obvious places, he couldn't find it. He searched the desk, the drawers, the cabinet. Nothing. A chill ran down his spine. That jewel was not only financially valuable, it was all that remained of Caroline besides photos and memories. He went downstairs 2 steps at a time and found Claire in the living room organizing magazines. "The box with the pearl necklace, did you see it? The one I left in the office." Claire looked up, her expression perfectly calibrated between surprise and concern. "Caroline's necklace? No, I didn't see it. Are you sure you left it in the office?" Robert felt irritation grow. "I'm sure. It was there yesterday when I went up to take a call." Claire frowned, thoughtful. "That's strange. Who has had access to the office since then?" Robert paused, processing. "Marion cleaned in there yesterday afternoon," Claire mentioned carefully. "But I prefer not to make hasty accusations. She's been with us for years, always reliable. Still, perhaps it would be prudent to check, just to rule out possibilities." The suggestion hung in the air like invisible poison. Robert didn't want to believe, didn't even want to consider it. But the jewel was gone, and someone had to have taken it. And Marion, however dedicated she was to Isabella, was ultimately an employee like any other. He didn't really know her, he realized with a sudden unease. He didn't know where she came from, who she lived with, what she thought. She was a constant but anonymous presence, part of the house's landscape. Claire saw doubt set in and seized the opportunity. "Mr. Ashton-Cole, I truly hope it's just a misunderstanding. Perhaps you put it somewhere else and forgot. But if there's the slightest possibility that something was improperly taken, we need to act quickly. Not just for the value of the piece, but for the principle. This house needs to be a place of absolute trust." Robert nodded slowly, his stomach churning. She was right. Gather all the staff in the dining room in 10 minutes. When Marion came downstairs, bringing Isabella by the hand, she didn't understand what was happening. The girl wanted to show her father a castle she had built with building blocks, but the atmosphere in the room was heavy, not conducive to play. Robert was serious, almost grim, and Claire beside him with an expression Marion couldn't quite decipher. Jessica was also there, confused, and the property's security guard at the door. "Isabella, go play in your room," Robert asked, with a firmness that startled the girl. "But Daddy, I want to show you," she protested. "Not now," he repeated, more harshly. Isabella felt tears burn, but Marion quickly knelt, wiped her face, and whispered that they would see the castle together later. The girl went upstairs slowly, turning back at each step, feeling that something was very wrong. Robert waited for the sound of her little footsteps to fade. Then he took a deep breath and began. "A jewel of great sentimental value has disappeared from my office. It's a necklace that belonged to my wife. I need everyone to understand the gravity of this. It's not just about financial value, it's about trust, about respect." Marion felt the ground shake beneath her feet. Was she being accused? Not directly yet, but the insinuation was there, heavy as lead. "As a precaution," Robert continued with evident discomfort, "I'm going to ask everyone to allow a check of their belongings. Just to clarify this situation quickly and definitively. It's a standard procedure." Jessica complained indignantly, but eventually agreed, opening her designer bag and emptying its contents onto the table. It only contained makeup, a wallet, and headphones. The security guard also showed his empty pockets. Only Marion remained. She picked up her bag with hands that trembled slightly, not from guilt, but from anticipated humiliation. She had never imagined being put in this position, had never given cause for suspicion. She opened her bag, her eyes burning, and began to take out her belongings. Her old wallet, where she kept the month's budgeted money, the keys to her Dagenham home, her headache medicine case, a packet of tissues, and then, as her hand fumbled at the bottom, she felt something hard wrapped in velvet. The blood drained from her face. She pulled out the blue box, completely unable to understand how it was there. Her eyes widened in genuine astonishment, her mouth open in silent shock. Impossible. She had never touched that jewel, never even opened the box. How on earth had it ended up in her bag? The silence in the room was broken by the sound of Robert taking a deep breath, as if he had been punched. He snatched the box from Marion's trembling hands and opened it, confirming the pearls were inside. The pain in his eyes quickly turned into cold anger. "How could you?" His voice came out low, dangerously low. "How could you steal this of all things? You know what this jewel means. You know what my wife meant." "Mr. Ashton Cole, I didn't. It wasn't me." Marion could barely form words, her throat tight with panic. "I would never take that. Never. I swear. I don't know how it got into my bag." Robert didn't want to listen. 5 years, Marion. 5 years I trusted you in my house near my daughter. And you steal the last thing I have of Caroline? What kind of person does that? Tears streamed down Marion's face, but they were not of guilt. They were of glaring injustice. "I didn't do anything," she pleaded. "Someone put that in my bag, I swear to God, by my children. I would never steal anything." Claire stepped forward, her voice filled with falsely sincere concern. "Marion, perhaps it's best you admit it, and we try to resolve this as painlessly as possible. If it was a moment of weakness, an impulse, we can understand, but denying it in the face of evidence only makes everything worse." "There's nothing to admit because I didn't do it," Marion cried, her voice breaking. "Please, you know me. You know I would never do this." Robert shook his head, his fists clenched. "I thought I knew you, but clearly I was wrong. I want you out of my house now. Pack your things and leave before I take more serious measures." The world crashed down on Marion. Losing her job was a financial catastrophe, but losing Isabella was an emotional tearing that she couldn't even process. "Wait, just let me say goodbye to Isabella, please. She'll be so confused, so scared. Let me at least explain to her." Robert was inflexible. "You will never go near my daughter again. You've caused enough damage. Leave now, or I'll call the police." Marion staggered, holding onto the back of a chair to keep from falling. Jessica looked away, embarrassed but not daring to get involved. Claire maintained an expression of studied sorrow, as if it pained her deeply, but it was necessary. The security guard took a step towards Marion, indicating she should cooperate. It was at that moment that a piercing sound broke the tension. Isabella screaming from the top of the stairs. "No!" The girl ran down, unbalanced by desperation, and threw herself into Marion's arms with such force that she almost knocked them both over. "Don't send Aunt Marion away, Daddy! Don't! She didn't do anything bad!" Robert tried to pull his daughter away, but Isabella clung with tooth and nail, screaming, crying, sobbing uncontrollably. Marion hugged the girl, both crying together, and something in that fierce embrace finally cut through Robert's anger. He saw for the first time, truly saw, the connection between them. It wasn't the normal relationship between employee and child. It was visceral love, it was a soul bond, it was the kind of connection that couldn't be faked, couldn't be bought. Isabella was heartbroken, not just sad, but truly devastated by the idea of losing Marion. "Aunt Marion is my heart, Mum," Isabella cried between sobs. "She takes care of me, she loves me, she stays with me when everyone else leaves. You can't send her away, you can't." The words hit Robert like whips. Heart, Mum. Isabella was only 3, but she already clearly distinguished who was present from who merely paid bills. And her choice, brutal in its honesty, did not include her own father as a central figure. Isabella pulled something from her dress pocket, a folded paper. It was another drawing made that very morning, which she wanted to show her father before everything exploded. She unfolded it with trembling little hands and held it out to Robert. "Look, Daddy, it's our family." Robert took the paper and felt his heart clench painfully. In the drawing were 3 figures, a small one in the center clearly representing Isabella. Beside her a larger figure holding her hand with a carefully drawn apron on. The other side, much more distant, almost at the edge of the paper, a tall figure in a suit. Below, Isabella had written with someone's help, probably her teacher. "My family, me, my heart, Mom Marion, and my daddy, who lives far away." Lives far away. They lived in the same house, but for Isabella, Robert was too distant to be considered truly present. The 3-year-old had summarized in a drawing the entire silent tragedy of that broken family. Robert felt nauseous, ashamed, a pain that didn't fit in his chest. When had everything gone so wrong? If you were in Robert's shoes right now, what would you do upon discovering this truth about how your daughter sees you? Tell us in the comments what you think about this moment in the story. Robert stood there, holding his daughter's drawing, feeling the weight of every choice he had made in recent years collapse onto his shoulders. Isabella continued to cling to Marion as if her life depended on it, and perhaps it truly did, in a way. The child needed that woman more than she needed expensive toys, international trips, or astronomical school fees. She needed presence, comfort, someone to be there when the world seemed too big for her 3 years of age. Claire observed the scene with growing discomfort. This was not going as planned. Robert should be furious, inflexible, relieved to have discovered the supposed betrayal in time. But instead, he seemed broken, confused, as if he were seeing something for the first time and didn't like what he saw at all. The manager needed to regain control of the narrative before everything crumbled. "Mr. Ashton Cole," she began in a soft but firm voice, "I understand this is a difficult moment, but we cannot let emotions cloud the facts. The jewel was in Marion's bag, that cannot be ignored. However attached Isabella may be to her and however painful it may be, we need to think about the example we are setting for the girl. We cannot teach that theft is forgiven simply because we like the person." Robert looked at Claire, then at Marion, who was still hugging Isabella, the girl sobbing against her chest. Something in that situation began to bother him differently. It wasn't just the pain of having been robbed, but something more subtle, something out of place. Marion had worked in the house for 5 years, had access to everything, knew the location of the safe, knew when he traveled. If she wanted to steal, she would have had dozens of better opportunities. Why now? Why leave the evidence so obvious in her own bag? He approached Marion, who looked up, her eyes red and swollen. "I swear on my children's lives, Mr. Ashton Cole," she whispered, with an intensity that cut through him. "I swear by everything sacred that I never touched that jewel. Someone put it in my bag to frame me. I know how it looks. I know I can't prove it, but you have to believe me." Robert studied her face, looking for signs of lying, but saw only genuine despair and a wounded dignity that persisted even under accusation. "When was the last time you saw this box?" he asked, his voice more controlled now. Marian thought, wiping away tears with the back of her hand. "It was Thursday morning when I cleaned your office. It was there on the cabinet near the window. I didn't touch it because I know they are your personal things. I just wiped around it and moved on to the other rooms. That was the only time I was in the office this week." Robert turned to Claire. "And you? When did you last see the jewel?" Claire blinked, a fraction of a second of hesitation that did not go unnoticed. "Me? It was also Thursday, when you called me to see the insurance papers. I remember the box was open on your desk. Then you went upstairs to take that call from Tokyo, and I waited in the office until you came back." Robert frowned. "You were alone in the office for how long?" The question caught Claire off guard. She forced a confused smile. "I don't know, about 20 minutes maybe. Why do you ask?" Robert didn't answer immediately. His brain, trained to identify inconsistencies in complex negotiations, began to put pieces together. Claire had had the opportunity. She had had access. And now that he thought about it, it was she who had suggested searching the bags, who had directed the search exactly where the jewel would be found. Isabella, still hugging Marian, sniffled loudly and looked at her father with eyes that could melt stones. "Daddy, Aunt Marian doesn't steal. She's good. She takes care of me when I have a fever, when I have nightmares, when you're not here." Every word was an unintentional but devastating accusation. Robert knelt to his daughter's height, touching her wet face. "Isabella, my love, I need to understand what happened here. Do you trust Aunt Marian that much?" The girl nodded with such conviction that it was impossible to doubt. "She loves me, Daddy. She always stays." Robert felt a knot in his throat. The phrase, "always stays," carried a world of meaning. She stayed when he traveled. She stayed when he came home late. She stayed when everyone else left. Marian stayed. And Isabella, with her childish but keen perception, recognized that as the greatest proof of love. He stood up and walked to the window, needing a moment to think. Outside, the perfectly manicured garden shone under the morning sun. Everything in his life seemed organized when viewed from the outside, but inside it was falling apart. He turned abruptly. "Claire, are you absolutely certain you saw Marian with access to the box? Are you sure she had the opportunity to take it?" Claire felt the ground begin to shake beneath her feet. "Well, I didn't see it directly. But she's the one who cleans the office, and the jewel was in her bag, Mr. Ashton Cole. The facts speak for themselves." Robert shook his head. "Facts can be manipulated. People too." He turned to the security guard. "The house's security cameras, do they record the interior as well, not just the external areas?" The security guard confirmed. "Yes, sir. We have cameras in the main corridors, in the living room, in the kitchen, and a discreet one in your office, facing the entrance door. You asked for it to be installed after that problem with disappearing deliveries last year." Robert felt a spark of hope. "Then we can see who entered and left the office on Thursday. We can see everyone's movements in the house. Bring the recordings immediately." Claire's face completely lost its color. She didn't know about the cameras in the office, a recent installation that hadn't been communicated to everyone. She had been careful with the external cameras, but had never considered that her own internal movements were being recorded. "Mr. Ashton Cole," she began, her voice slightly trembling, "don't you think you're overreacting? The jewel was found, it's back, we can simply move on. No need to involve technology, review hours of footage." But Robert was determined now, moved by a mixture of doubt and guilt. If Marian was telling the truth, if she had been framed, he had committed a grotesque injustice against someone who had dedicated years to caring for his daughter. And if Claire was lying, if she had orchestrated all this, then there was someone very dangerous working inside his house. "No, we will review it. I want to see everything. Every person who entered that office since Thursday. The security guard left to retrieve the equipment, and Claire found herself cornered. Her careful plan, her cold revenge, everything was about to blow up in her face. She thought about fleeing, about simply leaving before the images were seen, but that would practically be a confession. She tried another approach. "Mr. Ashton Cole, perhaps we should do this with more privacy. Not in front of everyone, not in front of Isabella." But Marion, who was beginning to see a light at the end of the tunnel, spoke firmly. "No, I want to stay. I want to see what the cameras show. I have nothing to hide," Robert agreed. "Jessica, please take Isabella to her room." The nanny, who had been silent the whole time, carefully took the girl's hand. Isabella resisted, but Marion knelt and promised she would be there to play with her soon. The girl went upstairs reluctantly, looking back at every step. 15 minutes later, everyone was gathered around the large television in the living room, where the security guard had connected his laptop with the recording files. They started from Thursday morning. They saw Marion enter the office carrying her cleaning supplies, dusting the furniture, vacuuming the rug, leaving 20 minutes later. At no point did she approach the velvet box that was visible on the cabinet. Then they saw Robert enter with Claire, both talking as he looked for papers. The box was clearly visible on the desk now. Robert went upstairs to take the call, and Claire remained alone. The camera captured the moment she looked around, making sure she was alone, picked up the box and placed it inside her own bag. The movement was quick, but unequivocal. The silence in the room was sepulchral. Robert felt nausea rise. Claire, motionless, looked like a pillar of salt. Jessica let out a quiet curse. Marion covered her mouth with her hands, both relieved and shocked. Robert rewound the recording, watched it again, needing absolute certainty. But there was no doubt. Claire had taken the jewel and hidden it in her own bag. They fast-forwarded to Friday, to the moment Marion went down to the basement to get cleaning supplies. The basement cameras were limited, but one of them showed the access corridor. Claire appeared shortly after Marion went down, looked around furtively, and went down too. She stayed down there for about 3 minutes, more than enough time to plant the jewel in Marion's bag. When she came up, her expression was tense but determined. Robert paused the video and slowly turned to Claire. His voice was low, dangerously calm. "You set all this up. You planted the jewel in Marion's bag. You orchestrated a frame-up to destroy her. Why?" Claire didn't answer immediately. Her face was pale, her lips trembling. Marion remained standing, processing the magnitude of what had almost happened to her. She would have been expelled, humiliated, possibly prosecuted, all for a carefully constructed lie. "Answer me, Claire," Robert raised his voice, anger finally breaking his restraint. "Why did you do this? What did Marion do to you to deserve such cruelty?" It was then that Claire broke down. She began to cry, not delicate tears, but convulsive sobs of someone who had held poison for too long. "She never did anything," she admitted through tears. "She's good, dedicated, perfect, and precisely for that reason I couldn't stand it." The confession poured out. She spoke about how invisible she felt, about how hard she worked to keep the house impeccable, but never received the kind of gratitude or affection that Marion effortlessly earned. She spoke about the corrosive jealousy she felt when she saw Isabella running into Marion's arms, about how much it hurt to be just the efficient administrator, while Marion was the heart mum. "I wanted to be important," she cried. "I wanted someone to love me that way. I wanted Isabella to see me as more than just an employee. But instead of trying to build a genuine relationship, you decided to destroy hers." Robert was incredulous. "Instead of learning from Marion's example, you tried to ruin her?" Claire had no answer. She knew that her reasons, however painful they were for her, did not justify what she had done. "I tried to hurt her because I was hurt," she acknowledged with a broken voice. "I tried to take from her what I couldn't have. It was horrible. It was cruel. It was unforgivable." Robert stepped away, needing distance. "You almost destroyed an innocent woman's life. You almost took from my daughter the only person who truly cares for her. You almost made me commit an irreparable injustice. All because you were jealous?" Claire cowered. She seemed smaller now, diminished by the weight of her own actions. I know apologies are not enough. I know there's no way to fix what I did. Robert turned to Marion, who was silent, still processing everything. He tried to find adequate words, but what to say to someone you had just falsely accused of theft? Someone you had humiliated, threatened to expel, almost destroyed, and who was innocent all along. Marion, he began, his voice failing, there are not enough words for what I just did to you. I believed the worst possible accusation, without even giving you a real chance to defend yourself. I trusted planted evidence instead of trusting 5 years of impeccable character. Marion wiped away her tears, but her voice came out firm. You believed it because deep down I'm invisible to you, aren't I? I'm the employee who cleans, who is there but isn't truly seen. You don't even know how old I am, if I have a family, where I come from, what I dream of. To you, I'm part of the furniture. So it was easy to believe I would steal because invisible people don't have character to defend. The words hit Robert like whips because they were absolutely true. He knew nothing about Marion beyond the superficial. He didn't know she had 2 children, that she had raised them alone, that she took 2 buses daily, that she frequently stayed beyond her hours without complaining because she couldn't see Isabella needing attention without intervening. He didn't know because he had never been interested in knowing. Marion was efficient, reliable, and that was enough for him, until it wasn't. You're right, he admitted, shame weighing in his words. And worse still, the one who truly knows my daughter is you, who knows what she likes to eat, what stories she prefers, what songs make her sleep. I live in the same house, I'm her biological father, but I'm a stranger to her. And you, who receive the lowest salary here, are the one who provides the motherhood that I should be supporting, but don't even recognize. He picked up Isabella's drawing again, that painful image of 3 figures where he appeared distant, separate. My own daughter draws me as someone who lives far away, and she's right. I am far away. Emotionally distant, physically absent, hidden behind work, because it's easier than dealing with the pain of having lost Caroline. Marion remained quiet, letting him process. Robert looked at her with eyes that finally saw. You fill the void I left. You do the work that should be mine. And instead of gratitude, I accused you of betraying me. He turned to Claire, who remained seated, devastated. You're fired. Immediately. I want you to leave this house today and never come back. I will consider not taking legal action against you only because it would cause more trauma for everyone, but I never want to see you near my family again. Claire nodded, knowing she deserved much worse. She stood up with difficulty and walked to the door, but before leaving she turned to Marion. I'm sorry, she said, and for the first time it sounded genuine. Not for getting caught, but for trying. You didn't deserve it. Marion didn't respond, just watched Claire leave, carrying the weight of her choices. When only Robert, Marion, and Jessica remained, the businessman took a deep breath. Jessica, you are also dismissed, not for malice, but because it has become clear to me that Isabella needs someone who truly cares, not someone just clocking in hours. The nanny opened her mouth to protest, but saw in his eyes that it would be useless. She gathered her things and left, quickly, relieved not to be in a worse position. Only the 2 of them remained, Robert and Marion, in a room filled with heavy silences. Marion, he began, kneeling before her in a gesture that shocked her, you hating me would be more than fair. But I am asking you, begging you to stay, not as a cleaning employee, but as Isabella's official caregiver, with a decent salary, a proper employment contract, all the rights, all the respect you have always deserved but never received. Marion looked at that powerful man on his knees before her and saw not arrogance, but sincere brokenness. More than that, Robert continued, I need your help. I need to learn to be a real father. Teach me what Isabella likes, what scares her, what makes her happy. Teach me to be present, because clearly I don't know how. I'm not asking you to cure my mistakes, but to give me a chance to start fixing them. Marion felt tears return, but now they were different, filled with relief and cautious hope. And Isabella? Will she understand all this? Robert shook his head. She'll understand that I finally woke up, that I almost lost the 2 most important people in my life by being blind, absent, and unjust, and that from now on things will truly change. I don't promise perfection, but I promise presence. I promise to try. Marion thought of her own children, of how she had raised them alone without the option of being absent. She thought of Isabella, whom she loved as if she were her own daughter. She thought of the chance to finally have her dedication recognized, valued, and justly compensated. "I accept," she said finally, "but with one condition. You really need to change, not just promise, but do. Because Isabella has suffered too much from absences. She deserves a present father, not just a distant provider." Robert extended his hand and Marion squeezed it, sealing an agreement that was much more than professional. It was a commitment to rebuild a broken family, to heal open wounds, to transform a cold house into a true home. They went upstairs together, finding Isabella sitting in the corridor, clearly having heard part of the conversation. The girl looked at them both with fragile hope. "Aunt Marion is staying?" Marion knelt and opened her arms. Isabella threw herself into them, and Robert for the first time joined the hug. The three stayed there, united by pain, forgiveness, and the silent promise that from then on, things would be different. Isabella had her heart mum secured, and perhaps, just perhaps, she was about to regain a real father too. The first few days after the revelation were strange for everyone in the mansion. Marion still woke at 5:30 in the morning purely out of habit, but now she no longer needed to take 2 crowded buses across the city. Robert had insisted that she move into one of the guest rooms. On the second floor near Isabella's room, a comfortable suite with a private bathroom and a view of the garden. It was a space larger than the entire living room of the house where she lived in Dagenham, and Marion needed a few days to get used to the idea that it was truly for her. Robert was also changing, although the transformation was visibly difficult for him. A man who had spent 5 years using work as a shield against pain could not simply turn off that defense mechanism. But he tried. He started by cancelling meetings considered secondary, delegating more to his management team, refusing trips that could be handled by video conference. For the first time in years, his schedule had intentional blank spaces, times reserved not for business, but for being present at home. The first morning Robert woke up early specifically to have breakfast with Isabella was awkward. He came downstairs at 7, when he would normally have been in the office for an hour, and found Marion preparing the heart-shaped pancakes the girl loved. Isabella was sitting at the table, still sleepy, swinging her legs that didn't reach the floor. When she saw her, father entered the kitchen in casual clothes instead of his usual suit. Her eyes widened in surprise. "Daddy, aren't you going to work?" Robert sat at the table beside her, the simple movement laden with meaning. "I am, but later. I thought I'd have breakfast with you first. Is that okay?" Isabella looked at Marion as if asking for confirmation that this was real, and Marion smiled encouragingly. The girl turned to her father and nodded, still a little suspicious of this new development. Marion served pancakes for both of them and discreetly stepped away, giving space to father and daughter, but Robert called her. "Stay with us," he asked, "please." And so began the mornings at the Ashton Cole home, the three of them together at the table, talking about dreams Isabella had, about plans for the day, about small things that gained importance precisely because they were shared. But not everything was easy. Isabella was 3 and held grudges in her own way. One afternoon, when Robert tried to help her with a jigsaw puzzle, the girl simply got up and took the pieces to Marion. "I want to do it with Aunt Marion," she declared, unceremoniously excluding her. "Father." Robert felt the rejection like a blade, but Marion intervened delicately. "Isabella, love, Daddy is trying to spend time with you. How about the 3 of us do it together?" The girl hesitated, but eventually agreed, and the 3 sat on the living room floor, assembling a 100-piece puzzle with animal designs. It was a simple, even mundane moment, but for Robert, it represented a small but precious victory. Each piece Isabella handed him, each time she asked for his help to find the right part, was a brick rebuilding the bridge between them. Marion observed these interactions with a mixture of hope and apprehension. She knew her presence was essential, but also that she needed to create space for Robert and Isabella to develop their own connection. It was a delicate balance, like walking a tightrope. If she was too protective, Isabella would never learn to trust her father. If she pulled away too quickly, the girl might feel abandoned by her source of security. One night, approximately 2 weeks after the whole upheaval, Isabella had a nightmare. She woke up crying, screaming about monsters under the bed. Marion heard it first and ran to the girl's room, but found Robert already there, holding his daughter in his arms, rocking her slowly. "It's okay, princess," he murmured. "Daddy's here. Won't let any monsters get you." Isabella clung to him, still sobbing, but beginning to calm down. Marion stood at the door watching and felt her heart clench with emotion. It was the first time she had seen Robert completely embrace that role, without needing instructions or encouragement. He hummed a soft tune that Marion didn't even know he knew, probably something he sang to Isabella when she was a baby. Before Caroline left, before everything fell apart, the girl finally relaxed, her breathing becoming more regular, and Robert laid her back in bed, pulling the blanket up to her chin. Marion silently stepped away, returning to her room, but a few minutes later she heard soft knocks on the door. Robert was there, his eyes shining. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" Marion asked. "For not coming in, for letting me be her father today. I needed that." Marion smiled. "And she needed to know you would be there. I'm not the one who should be thanking you." Days turned into weeks, and the changes became increasingly visible. The mansion that once functioned as a well-oiled but soulless machine began to come alive. There was laughter echoing through the corridors, music playing in the living room, controlled mess in Isabella's room, because finally someone was playing with her instead of just organizing her toys. Robert installed a swing in the backyard and spent afternoons pushing Isabella, listening to her shouts of joy mixed with requests for "higher, daddy, higher." He also began to participate in the school routine. He attended the first parent-teacher meeting in 5 years and almost couldn't believe it when the teacher, Ms. Sylvia, recognized him from photos but clearly didn't expect to see him in person. "Mr. Ashton Cole, what a pleasant surprise," she greeted with genuine astonishment. "Isabella will be so happy when she knows you came. The girl talks a lot about you lately. Says her daddy plays with her now." Robert felt a mixture of pride and shame. Pride for the progress, shame for the lost years. The teacher showed Isabella's work, including a new activity about family. This time, the drawing had 3 figures very close together, all holding hands with huge smiles. Below, Isabella had written with the teachers, "Help, my happy family." Robert asked to take the drawing home and had it framed, prominently placing it in the living room, replacing an expensive painting by a famous artist. But not everything was perfect. Robert still slipped occasionally, taking calls during dinner, bringing his laptop to the bedroom, staying up late reviewing contracts. One of those nights, Isabella knocked on his office door already in her pajamas, dragging her teddy bear. "Daddy, are you going to sleep?" The innocence of the question, filled with genuine concern, cut through Robert. He looked at the computer screen, at the numbers and graphs, and then at his little daughter at the door waiting. He closed the laptop decisively. "Yes, I am. Do you want me to read you a story before you sleep?" Isabella's face lit up. "Can you read the one about the princess who plants flowers?" Robert didn't even know which story that was, but he went to her room, picked up the book Isabella indicated, and read with different voices for each character, making the girl laugh until her stomach hurt. When he finished, she was almost asleep but held his hand. "Daddy?" He leaned in. "Yes, my love. I like it when you're home. It makes the house feel warmer." Robert kissed her forehead, emotion closing his throat. "I like it too, princess, and I'll be home much more from now on. I promise." He left the room and found Marion in the corridor. She was folding some of Isabella's clothes she had taken from the dryer. He helped her in silence for a moment before speaking. "Marion, can I ask you a question?" She nodded. "How do you do it? To be present, to give attention, even when you're tired, even when you have 1,000 other things on your mind?" Marion thought before answering. "Because for me, she was never a secondary obligation. She was the reason I was here. You came home thinking about the work you left in the office and the work that awaited you tomorrow. I came to take care of her, And everything else was secondary. I'm not a better person than you, I just had different priorities because my situation was different. Robert absorbed the words. And now? Do you think I can really change this? Do you think I can be the father she needs? Marion looked at him, sincerely. You already are, Mr. Ashton Cole, every day a little more. Isabella notices, I notice. The important thing isn't to be perfect, it's to be present. It's choosing her over a meeting once in a while. It's turning off your phone to hear about her day at school. It's being there when she wakes up with a nightmare, when she's sick, when she needs comfort. You're learning, and that's already more than many fathers do. Weeks turned into months. The mansion underwent small changes that reflected the transformation of its inhabitants. Photos of Isabella appeared throughout the rooms, not just professional, posed ones, but spontaneous, smiling, full of life photos. Robert's office gained a small table in the corner where Isabella could draw while he worked, so they could be together even during working hours. The kitchen ceased to be the exclusive territory of the cook and became a place for disastrous but hilarious culinary experiments, with Robert trying to make pancakes that came out crooked and burnt, but which Isabella ate anyway, declaring them delicious. Marion was officially promoted, not just in practice but with formal recognition. Robert hired a lawyer to ensure she had all employment rights, a salary commensurate with her responsibilities, and even established an education fund for her 2 children, a way to compensate for the years she had dedicated so much to Isabella at the expense of her own family. Marion's children were initially suspicious of this sudden change, but when they visited the mansion and saw their mother being treated with respect and dignity, not just as an employee, but as an essential part of that family, they began to accept it. Robert also hired additional help for household chores, ensuring Marion could focus exclusively on Isabella and her development without needing to divide her energy with heavy cleaning. A young woman named Deborah, a part-time pedagogy student, came to work and quickly became as attached to the family as she was welcomed by them. The house gained a new, lighter, more affectionate dynamic. 6 months after that fateful day when everything almost fell apart, Isabella's school organized a special presentation for Family Day. Each child would give a small presentation about their family and could bring anyone they wanted as special guests. Isabella didn't hesitate. She wanted Daddy and Aunt Marion. Robert cancelled an important meeting in San Francisco, rescheduled video conferences, reorganized his entire week to ensure he would be there. And he was in the front row beside Marion when Isabella stepped onto the small, improvised stage. The girl, now a full 4 years old, spoke with surprising clarity for her age. My family is small, but full of love. There's my daddy, who works a lot but now also plays with me. And there's my heart mom, Aunt Marion, who always took care of me and taught me that love doesn't need a last name. Then she showed her most recent drawing, where 3 figures were hugging, all smiling, under a giant rainbow. My family, she declared proudly. Robert felt tears stream down uncontrollably. Marion also cried, but they were tears of gratitude, of fulfillment. Around them other parents applauded. Some also moved, recognizing in Isabella's story a reminder that family is not defined only by biology, but by presence, dedication, and love. After the presentation, Isabella ran into their arms, and they hugged her together, an improbable but genuine unit. On the way back home, Isabella fell asleep in the back seat of the car, exhausted but happy. Robert drove slowly, savoring the peace of that moment. Marion, he began, breaking the comfortable silence, I will never be able to thank you enough for what you've done, not just for Isabella but for me too. You saved me from becoming the kind of father my daughter would one day resent. You showed me that professional success means nothing if you lose your family in the process. Marion looked out the window, watching the city pass by. You saved yourself, she replied. I just held up the mirror, the choice to change, to be present, to give up meetings and contracts to be at a school presentation. That choice was all yours. Many fathers in your position would have sent a secretary to record, would have sent an expensive gift as compensation for their absence. You chose to be there. That makes all the difference. When they arrived home and Robert carried a sleeping Isabella to her room, gently laying her down, he paused for a moment watching his daughter sleep. Her curls spread on the pillow, her teddy bear clutched against her chest, the soft, tranquil breathing of someone sleeping peacefully. He remembered how he had almost lost it all, how his own emotional blindness had almost cost him the most important relationship in his life. And he remembered Claire, how jealousy and bitterness had led her to commit a horrible act. Occasionally, in quiet moments, Robert thought about Claire and wondered where she might be, if she had found peace, if she had learned from that devastating mistake. He no longer felt anger, just a distant sadness for someone who allowed her own wounds to transform her into something cruel. He hoped she had found help, perhaps therapy, perhaps a new beginning somewhere else, but he had no intention of seeking her out or formally forgiving her. Some wounds needed distance to heal. 1 year after the entire upheaval, the mansion hosted a small party for Isabella's 5th birthday. It wasn't an extravagant celebration with hundreds of guests and expensive imported decorations. It was a simple garden party, with school friends, some neighbors, Marion's children and their spouses, the cook and Deborah, who were already part of the family. There were colorful balloons, a homemade cake that Robert had helped make, and which turned out crooked but delicious, and lots of laughter. Isabella blew out the candles, making a wish that she later confessed aloud for everyone to hear, that her family would always stay together and happy. The request brought tears to several adults present. Robert picked up the improvised microphone they used to liven up the party and asked for attention. "I want to thank everyone for being here celebrating with us, but most importantly I want to thank 2 very special people." He looked at Isabella. "My daughter, you taught me that being a father isn't just about providing, but about being present. You taught me that love is measured in dedicated time, in genuine attention, in being there when you're most needed." And he turned to Marion. "And you, Marion, taught me that family is sometimes a choice, not just blood. You chose to love my daughter when no one asked you, when it wasn't your obligation. You chose to stay when anyone else would have simply completed their hours and left. You are an essential part of this family, and I hope you know that." Marion covered her face with her hands, too emotional to respond. Isabella ran to her and hugged her tightly, and Marion's 2 children joined the embrace, grateful to see their mother finally valued as she deserved. The party continued until sunset, and when everyone left, the house was in an organized mess that Robert didn't even try to tidy up immediately. There were forgotten cups in the garden, cake crumbs in the kitchen, deflated balloons in the corners. But there was also laughter still echoing in the walls, new memories being created, love transforming every room of that mansion into a true home. That night, after Isabella fell asleep exhausted but radiant, Robert and Marion sat on the terrace, watching the lights of London twinkle in the distance. "It was a good day," Robert commented. Marion agreed. "It was a perfect day." They sat in comfortable silence for a while before Robert spoke again. "You know, I was thinking, the company is doing well. Maybe I can start working more from home, reduce travel even further. I want to be present for every phase of her life, not just the big moments, but the small ones too." Marion smiled. "Isabella will love that. And so will you. You'll see that the small moments are often the best." Robert nodded, knowing she was right. He had already learned that, but would continue learning every day. The process of becoming the father his daughter deserved had no end. It was a continuous journey with ups and downs, successes and mistakes. But now he had something he didn't have before: awareness, intention, and a support network in the form of an extraordinary woman who taught as much as she cared. 2 years passed since that terrible day that almost destroyed everything. Isabella was 6 now, in her first year of primary school, year 1, reading small books with enthusiasm and filling the house with endless questions about how the world worked. Robert had established a solid routine. He woke early to have breakfast with her, took her to school 3 times a week, picked her up whenever he could, and dedicated Friday afternoons exclusively to father-daughter activities. His company prospered, but he had learned to delegate, to trust his team, to understand that being indispensable at work meant failing at home. Marion remained the solid rock of the family, But now her own life was also flourishing. She had enrolled in a child development course funded by Robert, expanding her knowledge and further legitimizing the incredible work she had always done through intuition and love. Her children visited regularly, and the mansion had become a gathering place for Sunday lunches where everyone was welcome. One Saturday afternoon, Robert was helping Isabella with a science project about plants when she asked a question that caught him off guard. "Daddy, if Mummy Caroline were here, would she like Aunt Marion?" Robert paused, the scissors suspended in the air, processing the question. It was the first time in a long time that Isabella had consciously mentioned the biological mother she had never known. He thought carefully before answering. "Your mother would have loved Aunt Marion," he said sincerely. "She would have been grateful to have someone so special taking care of you when I was lost and couldn't. I think she would have become friends with Aunt Marion, would have trusted her completely, and I think she would be happy to know you have so much love around you." Isabella considered this, then nodded contentedly and went back to gluing leaves on the poster. Marion, who had overheard the conversation from the kitchen, felt her heart clench. She had never tried to replace Caroline, never claimed the title of formal mother. She had always been Aunt Marion, the heart mom, a role she performed with love but also with respect for the woman who came before. And to know that Robert recognized this, that he honored both Caroline's memory and Marion's dedication, meant more than any words could express. That night, after Isabella fell asleep, Robert found Marion in the kitchen preparing coffee. He sat at the table, tired but satisfied. "Marion," he began, and she noticed a different solemnity in his voice. "There's something I want to formalize. You are unequivocally part of this family. Isabella calls you her heart mom, and that is true, but I want to ensure that, if anything happens to me, you have legal rights over her. I want to name you as joint guardian, establish in my will that you have a guaranteed place in her life, regardless of any circumstances." Marion's eyes widened. "Mr. Ashton Cole, I don't know what to say." He held her hand across the table. "Say you accept. Say you will continue to be for her what you always have been, no matter what the future brings." Marion squeezed his hand back, tears falling freely. "I accept. I will always care for her as if she were my own daughter, because in my heart she is." The following years were years of growth for everyone. Isabella blossomed into a confident, loving child, secure in her place in the world, because she had a solid foundation at home. Robert built a legacy not only in business but in family, proving that it is possible to be professionally successful without sacrificing the people we love. And Marion saw her life's work recognized, a life dedicated to loving a child who was not born to her, but whom fate had placed in her arms. The mansion in Kensington Gardens, which had once been a cold and impeccable palace, had transformed into a noisy and welcoming home. There were children's drawings on the refrigerator, crooked photos hanging on expensive walls, toys forgotten in corners. And there was love, so much love that it transformed every room, every corridor, every staircase into a silent witness of a family that almost lost itself, but chose to find each other. A decade after that terrible day when everything almost fell apart, Isabella was a 14-year-old teenager, balanced and mature beyond her years. In a school essay about people she admired, she wrote about two figures: her father, who had learned to prioritize what truly matters, and her heart mom, who had taught her that love doesn't need a birth certificate. The essay won a school award, and Robert framed it next to the old drawing from when Isabella was 3. Comparing the two works was to see the complete journey. In the old drawing, 3 separate, disconnected figures, a distant father. In the teenage text, a united family, a story of redemption, transformation, and love that had overcome all adversities. Marion still woke up early, still cared for Isabella with unwavering dedication, but now as a conscious choice by everyone, not as an accidental circumstance. Robert still worked hard, but never at the expense of his family, always balancing, always present in the moments that mattered. And when Isabella, years later, would write her college dissertation on non-traditional family structures, she would use her own story as a case study. She would talk about how a cleaning employee became a heart mom, how an obsessed businessman learned to be a father, how a family rebuilt itself from the ashes of tragedy and near destruction. She would also talk about Claire, not with anger but with compassion, recognizing how unhealed wounds can transform us into dark versions of ourselves, and how important it is to seek help before pain turns to poison. The story of the Ashton Cole family became, in small circles, an example that it is never too late to change, that acknowledging a mistake requires more courage than persisting in it, and that family is built as much with blood as with a deliberate choice to love and be present. It was a story of second chances, of healing forgiveness, of love that transcends titles and social roles. Dear listeners, we hope that the story of Robert, Marion, and Isabella has deeply touched your heart. If you were moved by this journey of transformation, forgiveness, and true love, click the like button, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our stories, and tell us in the comments which moment resonated with you the most. Did you identify with Marion's silent dedication? Did you feel Robert's pain upon realizing he almost lost everything? Or perhaps you understood Claire's wound that led her to make terrible decisions? We want to know your opinion. Every day we bring intense narratives like this, stories that reveal the deepest and truest side of the human soul, that make us reflect on our own choices and relationships. We look forward to seeing you in the next episode with another story that will move you and make you think about what truly matters in life.